100 years of experience lie in Ideal, South Dakota. The team at Jorgensen Land Cattle is going to take the time to offer insight into that experience along with many other industry experts. If you're ready to learn and grow, this is The Source. Well, thank you guys for joining us again at The Source. I'm your host, Jamie, along with my producer, Boston, and excited to have two guys back in the room with me from episode 1. We're going to step back into something that we started into on episode 1 and kind of paused as we were getting pretty long in the day. We want to talk about the Jorgensen Land Cattle partnership as it was formed, as it stands today, and something that's really important to you guys as I've worked with you is the logo. And hearing the story in the first episode, I think that really shows how impactful the logo is. So, Bryan and Cody, I'm going to let you guys go ahead and take me to, I believe you said the year was 2000?
Right.
So take me to the year 2000 and when you guys formed Jorgensen Land Cattle Partnership as it changed into what it stands as today. And, you know, we kind of skipped a little bit of those early 2000s history in our last episode. So just kind of take me through a little bit of that, and then we'll dig into what this logo really means to you guys.
Sure. So coming into the 2000 year, neither Cody and I had a whole lot of ownership in any of the entities of Jorgensen Land and Cattle. Previous to that, it was Jorgensen Farms, Inc., and there was ranches, and then there was a pork facility, too, that was intermingled in that as well. But we formed this partnership because, we needed to have some sense of ownership. Cody and I, of course, had taken over the management of it in 1997, and we felt very comfortable with where we were in that. You know, we both had plans of maybe not being here in the mid-90s. So after all the Dakota Lean things that happened and the prison time with my father, brother, and sister-in-law, and Cody and I became the drivers, right? And we had a really good sense of our capacity to do that. And so my father transferred some ownership to both Cody and Nick at the time. Well, Nick was later on, to Cody at the time. And so we basically started by forming the partnership, just a general partnership. And I had some land that I put into it as collateral. So that's really was the first sense. And it was, I think, 30-30 and 30 and 10. So it was 30% Cody, 30% Bryan, 30% Greg, and 10% Martin. Okay? And so that's really where it's just a general partnership. One of the reasons that we formed the partnership as it was A, simplicity, and B, it was also to kind of work through some of the FSA guidelines at the time in terms of maximizing the amount of direct payments that we could get and so forth.
Right.
So
yep.
That's a real brief of the business side of it.
Yep. Okay. So as you two take on some more ownership, obviously the business has changed some since then as Nick has come in, and now we have classifications as to chief agronomy officer, chief cattle officer, Nick being the CEO. Mm-hmm. When did that kind of take place for you guys? Were those titles prior to Nick coming back, or was those things kind of just unspoken and understood at the time?
I think it was unspoken and understood. I think it became official once Nick came back, and we all needed new business cards or something like that.
Yeah, I actually think it was after we employed Alan. We started doing the tiering structure, and that didn't happen until 2017?
Yeah, somewhere in there. So,
shortly after we moved into our new office here.
Yep. But going back to the logo, I'll never forget the day that Bryan worked with, I forget who it was you were working with to help actually design the logo itself. And when I'll never forget where I was standing, honestly, when he brought that first draft of the logo and the 3 diamonds. And I looked at that thing, and it just hit me. It meant so much, because that is exactly what we basically built and formed. And I mean, it was like it was us. And when I say us, I mean the four of us at the time. And it just, even talking about it kind of gives me a little bit of goosebumps. But
Giving me them right now, to be honest with you.
yeah, it just really represented our family and the unification that was started from there forward. It just was a huge deal.
What year would that have been?
2000.
2000.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, when we look at the logo, and we'll put it in here so everybody can see it. Mm-hmm. The 3-diamond concept. Bryan, why don't you go ahead and tell me, how that came into your mind, and then we'll talk a little bit about the individual pieces of what this logo is.
So the concept really was in my mind. The bull head itself in the center was already in existence. Right. We had that contracted through an artist, and he actually drew it on the old face of our old barn. It was it was like 15 feet tall. It was really, the time, that was back in the 80s. And that silhouette of that bull had a really strong impression on me personally. Right. Not because I was on the cattle side, but just the way he did that logo was really cool. And so that was our letterhead for many, many years.
And not to derail you there, but, that particular logo of the bullhead has become such a staple because it's been sale covers, all the marketing covers. Mm-hmm. Clear back to, the early 80s is when I've kind of found on sale books and those kinds of things that it was very much.
Right.
When you saw that, you knew there was an ideal prefix attached to it, and it was Jorgensen.
Right.
Yep. Farms, ranches at the time.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to lose that piece of history. Right. And I wanted it to be the centerpiece because let's be honest, that's the driving force behind JLC, right? Yep. And so in my mind, we needed to encapsulate not just that, but everything else that we do with the land. We weren't in the commercial hunting business in a big way yet, but we were definitely doing hunting. Mm-hmm. And obviously we were growing crops. So those three things were kind of the imprint in my mind that said, this is what we do. This is who we are. These are the components of Jorgensen Land and Cattle. Now, how do we visualize that? So I just had, for some reason, I had circles in my mind and diamonds and different things. And I just drew a few things up and conceptualized through that. And then we hired a firm out of Mitchell, graphic design people, just to finish it. And that's really how it came about. It wasn't any more scientific than that.
And I find it so interesting that, we talk about that, and commercial hunting wasn't a big part of what you guys were doing at the time, but it was influential enough that, because one of my questions was going to be, has the logo evolved? Because I honestly assumed that in the early 2000s, the pheasant probably wasn't there. So my assumption is incorrect, that you had the foresight that that this was going to have to be part of this business.
Yep.
No, it was there, and Cody can vouch for that because he ran it. So
it was there. It took a lot of time, and it was 60 straight days of hunting, But it also was a time, I think, in our business. We were the hog business was. I mean, nobody wanted to do it. I think Bryan mentioned that in the last episode. So it was just a huge time of reunification and reprioritizing, what we do. Right. Really gave Bryan a chance to focus on soil health, allowed me to spend 100% of my time, other than the hunting, on cattle. And it's what we love, right? We're going to do what we love. Right. And it was just a good time, and we were in such a good place at that time,
Yeah, I remember a few years ago. It's probably the logo's 25 years old this year, and I remember maybe 10 years ago, was before we moved. I kind of went to both Cody and Nick and said, "Hey, do you guys think we need to update this logo? I mean, it's been around for 15 years or so." And a lot of logos go through a transformation process. They get refined and simplified. And I got a hard and adamant, no, we're leaving that thing alone. It's perfect the way it is. It illustrates what we do. It's unification. It's synergies, and it talks about who we are.
Yeah.
And it's become an element of who we are.
Yep, it really has. And I use it a lot in every presentation that I give, whether I'm talking about genetics or just JLC in particular. Even the hunters, every time the hunters come and do a tour, I use the logo, and I have a slide with just the logo on it. And we talk about three things that our family thinks about when we look at an acre of property, right? Number one, soil health, right? And that's what the right side of the diamond would represent. Number two, just having the ability to graze that acre at some point in time. Farm acres or native prairie, having a hoof on the acre. Brian will talk about how important it is to that acre. And then, of course, the third thing, which is the left diamond, and that's agritainment, production, agricultural entertainment. And if there's a lot of families that can do one, perhaps two of those things really well, but for a family to do all three and do it world class, it's rare. And that's exactly what our logo represents.
So let's break this thing apart just a little bit. You know, we've got the three diamonds, and they all tie together. And I think, you know, Cody just very eloquently stated how those things all tie together. But when we start in the middle and we look at the bull silhouette, that's kind of the anchor, right? And you guys correct me if I'm wrong. So that was here first. But the farming was also here. Yep. So and the soil health. Brian, why don't you go ahead and touch a little bit on the importance of that diamond and the soil health in this operation. You know, talking about the amount of feed we put up, how many cows we're trying to run on this place, and just trying to be able to produce quality feed. It makes a better end product for our commercial bull customers that are using our genetics.
Right. Well, soil health wasn't in 2000 wasn't a centerpiece focus for me. Obviously, we were no-tilling, but the actual soil health aspect of that didn't really come along until we won the Leopold Award in 2015, the Aldo Leopold Award, which really inspired us to refocus our energies harder on soil health and pasture management and so forth. But yeah, it's really a huge component for me, because it's my role, my responsibility to grow the feedstuffs, whether it's on the hoof for them or in a kitchen, in a large kitchen in the feed yard. It's my responsibility to make sure that we have enough feed. And quite frankly, in some years that can be very difficult because we don't know if we're going to get rain or not. So, but I'll do my dangest to grow that crop, and all the while preserving and growing the health of that soil, not diminishing it, but growing it, so that we can say in future generations that soil is going to be better preserved and in better shape when somebody else takes it over than when I did.
And so this is all dry land acres, correct?
These are all dry land acres. There's no irrigation at all in this part of the world.
Just no water available.
Yeah.
So another part of our business that was your business to start with, that has now come under the Jorgensen Land Cattle umbrella, also really ties into that diamond. Why don't you go ahead and touch on Summit Gold a little bit?
Sure.
And what those products do for us in this aspect.
So it was probably 1995. By happenstance, I met a fellow that was working for a soil amendment company, and I met him by chance. He was a pilot, and he owned land near Peoria that a farmer/rancher was farming and ranching, and he was buying bulls from us. So this acquaintance of mine flew Chip up here to look at some bulls. And he came out to the farm just to be here. And Martin, basically, my dad said at the airport, come on out, meet the family. You might be interested in meeting Brian because he's our crop person. He might be interested in what you have to share. And immediately, Dean Fry and I struck off a really positive relationship. And I was very intrigued by the philosophies that they were talking about. And the philosophies were understanding soil balance and learning how to manipulate that to make it more efficient so you can use less applied fertilizer. Because prior to that, I felt like we were hitting a glass ceiling. We were applying the NPK system, if you will, of uptake, in which it's, to me, that model is completely old and gone. But it was designed to tell you how much fertility to put out there based on how much crop uptake you will have, regardless of the soil chemistry, regardless of management, regardless of organic, all those things. And what he was telling me made a lot more sense. And so we started working with that company. And in 2001, Dean broke off. He and another partner broke off and created Summit Gold. Okay. And I was a dealer for him immediately. And we've been working and growing together ever since.
Okay. And Summit Gold is a biological focus,
yes,
soil health company.
Yes.
In lieu of your standard fertilizers, and there's a lot more emphasis on true nature, balance of
correct
of how you talk a lot about the similarities between the rumen and soil health, and being a ruminant nutritionist.
Yeah,
I completely understand, what little tweaks can truly impact something, and products that we can use that can make drastic changes.
The philosophies that stuck with me were that, and they didn't compare the rumen because they weren't cattle nutritionists by a stretch, but the biological system that we have in our soils, and the more we have of them, the more efficient everything becomes. And it doesn't matter if you're on a normal old NPK system or you're on a low input sustainable regenerative type system. Biology is what drives that system. Okay, it's not just putting dry fertilizer on the soil and the plant takes it up. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
There's biology that are breaking that down and sharing that. The plants are talking to the biology through chemical signals. Say, hey, I need this, and I will exchange carbon or carbohydrates that I get from the sun for zinc or cobalt or copper. That's how it works. And so the more we try and enhance the system in the soil to sustain the biology or adding more biology to it, you get more efficiency, meaning you need to apply less fertility.
Right.
It's really that simple.
Absolutely. So that takes care of 2 of the 3. So now we come back to talking about, in the early days, 60 straight days of hunting pheasants.
Yep.
So I love the term agritainment. Very few people use that. I picked it up from you.
It actually is a real word. You can look at it.
Yeah, it should be.
It is.
It is. But what an impactful part of not just what we do here, but for the entire industry. So take me back to the early days of pheasant hunting here at Jorgensen Land Cattle, and then up through where we are today with the lodge and how that part of the business stands.
Okay.
And then we're going to tie back into the farming and the cattle side of it,
and how it all works together.
With how all that works together.
Sure enough. So, yep, I would say I don't remember exactly the exact year we started taking in pay hunters, trespass fees, day hunts, whatever you want to call them. Right. I think it was around 95 or 6. It was right before I got back from college, which was 97. And started with just a few groups. Literally, they would show up at the office, and we'd collect their money, sign a waiver, and they'd take their vehicles to a kind of a central hunting zone location, and we'd spend the rest of the day hunting. And it was just me as the guide, and I would get the walkers lined up, and then go to the other end of the field, get the blockers lined up, and then let everybody kind of come together, and then we do it again. Yep. And at that time, we were in the height of our pheasant population. I would say I call it the glory days. Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't take long, and you would have your limit. It seemed like 2 or 3 walks. And then over the years, through the 2000s, they really got, I guess, it ramped up. It got to the point where we were having multiple groups per day, and it got to the point where I couldn't handle it by myself anymore. And I think I want to say around 2007, 8, or 9, right in there, the bird population really started to decline. We had some bad hatches. We had a hailstorm. I think 2 or 3 hail events that come through in the hailstorms.
Predator levels were coming up.
Yep, everything was just and it was just getting tougher and tougher.
Right.
And it's like what we do in everything else. You know, we don't seem to just be complacent with one spot in anything we do. We always are, you know, it's our nature to continue to get more, do more, be bigger, yada, yada, yada. And we were doing this with wild birds, and it wasn't sustainable. It was not. We figured out that it was not sustainable. And I was just harvesting too many birds. It was good, but it wasn't sustainable. And things started to kind of somewhat decline. So the opportunity came to buy the Skews property in 2011, I think it was, Brian.
Correct.
And we did that, and along with that came their book of business of hunters, which they had, I believe at the time, around 6 groups of hunters, 6 group of 20 hunters that they hunted basically 6 weekends in a row. And so we managed that, I think I want to say 2 seasons. Or
no,
just one?
It was just the one.
Just one?
Just the one fall of 11.
Okay, and so we managed that separately, and we had hired another gentleman to kind of help with that. And I still maintained the trespass or the day hunters.
Okay.
And then it was shortly after that, 2011, then Brian and I, he could tell that it was exhausting, and it was not sustainable, and things were getting harder. And so he says, we need to really evaluate this hunting deal, which didn't mean we're going to flush it down the stool.
Right.
We're really going to throw everything out on the table and really evaluate what this looks like. So we took the Skews book of business and what we were doing with our book of business and kind of molded it together, so to speak, and both concluded that we have enough acres to sustain 2 groups of 40, 2 groups of 20, 40 total.
Yep.
And hunt them. But it was going to take a new lodge. It was going to take more than just a cook shack. It was going to take, it was going to take all this stuff. And so that's when the discussion came about in 2012. We're going to build this lodge.
Right.
And it made sense. It wasn't just one of these things that we just pulled out of our back pocket and said, hey, we're doing this. There was a lot of thought process.
We ran numerous economic models that basically our financial advisor at the time, who was in-house, Daryl Ellis, helped us write on basically a spreadsheet.
Yep.
So we made some assumptions on cost, construction. We made some assumptions of management, blah, blah, blah. And what it told us was we initially designed it to be a group of 10 or 20 guys, one group. So it'd be basically 10 rooms. But no matter how we sliced it, we could not make that model work unless we charged them a lot of money.
Right.
So then we added another tier to that with a somewhat more cost of a construction, but minimally compared to the income that it would generate. So it was all about the rooms.
Right.
And that model worked. And so that's why we have 2 groups of 20. And that model was kind of the way that whole lodge was designed, around those 2 definitive groups of people. So the challenge was then, okay, we have Doc's group of buddies and hunters, but we also have to fill that with another group. So Cody was basically challenged with that, and I was challenged with, let's just get the lodge built. And Brenda and I will manage it. And I was the one that was making sure that the lodge was being built on time, on schedule. And it was a very, very tight schedule.
Yeah.
It sounds that way if it was
super
end of 2011 and
Yes.
we're looking at hunting in 2012. That's
it happened.
I believe it.
So we basically hired an architectural firm in February. We interviewed several, but this particular firm was working with a contractor out of Aberdeen that builds hotels. And they were the only group that sat in the room together that told us, yes, we can have this thing done by 18th of October that year. Because everybody else was like, there's no way we can do that. And this group of guys said, yeah, we can do that. And by God, they did.
Yeah, and we couldn't. It was critical to us
Yeah.
too, because we could not miss out on, especially the opening weekend of hunting season.
Right.
it was, I mean, it was cash flow. We needed to have it done by then.
And it, not only did they get it done, but they got it done with quality in mind too. It's not just thrown together. It's a well-built facility.
Yep.
It's for the long term.
Yeah.
Were all the outbuildings designed at that time, or did the bull room come later?
Yeah,
Bull room came later.
Yeah.
Okay.
That came out of the need of just we're running out of space for doing the things that we needed to do.
Yep.
So in what year did preserve status come about?
17, 18?
I want to say 18. Yeah, right around 2018. And again, the birds declined through
Right.
2011. 2012 was horribly dry that year. The year we built the lodge, it was just a dry year. We had a horrible hatch. And so consequently, the hunting season 2012, 2013 were really tough. It got a little better, I think, in 15, but not much, to the point where it was just, we were starting to have dissatisfied clients and
Right.
needed to just do something different.
Okay.
And that's when the preserve status came. And, that decision was really pretty easy, other than the fact we were building a business on wild birds, and our preservation of the land and all the cover that we created for the birds and did everything. Whatever we could do, it just didn't really matter because they weren't hatching proper. We were just having bad hatches. And so all the stuff that we were doing didn't make enough difference for us to not go preserve status. So
Right.
today we're doing all that stuff, but the preserve just gives us more weekends, and it gives us just kind of a guarantee that these guys are going to be able to shoot something. So
Right. Yep.
it was a good call.
Yep. Absolutely. So, Brian, talk to me a little bit about if we have a hunting lodge, they have to have somewhere to hunt. And yeah, we've got a lot of natural draws, and for those of you that have been to South Central South Dakota, you can watch your dog run away for 10 miles, but it's going to be up and down through the hills, and there's a lot of good natural places to hunt, but that's pretty tough hunting at times. So talk to me a little bit about, from the farming side, how you work around ensuring that these guys have good places to hunt, but
Right.
we're also taking care of the ground, and we're making sure that we've got feed in the bunkers
Right.
to take care of the center of this
Right.
diamond logo.
Well, first of all, the preserve status simplified that quite a
Okay.
bit. So there's 2 preserves, and each of those has up to 2,500 acres that are eligible to be within that preserve status. So most of, I'd say 80% of the food plots that we have designated today fall within the boundaries of those 2
Okay.
preserves. Outside of that, we have some as well, but they're more wild bird. They don't have any release birds go into them. And so those are kind of special hunts for us, family hunts, and a few, some really, it's more real, more native, if you will. But the food plot concept is pretty much the same, whether they're on preserves or not. They're all designed about the same. They're 120 feet wide, and they're usually around a half mile long. So there's on the edge of a quarter, or sometimes in the center of a quarter. And sometimes they're strategic in that they're tied in with some trees or tree rows, but they're all kind of managed the same. They're going to be one crop species, usually a Milo or Milo cane type thing.
Okay.
And they are, I got to be honest, they're kind of a pain because they don't get as much attention in the spring as the primary feed crops do. We focus on getting those planted first, but we've made some management changes so that we've got equipment designated to get those things planted timely. But they are a pain. I mean, you're going to spend more per acre on that crop than you will on any other crop, just because of the time. You're still growing a crop, right? So you have herbicide, fertilizer, and those things. So, yeah, I mean, it's a pain, but they're very lucrative acres.
Yeah, very necessary. And I could give Brian a lot of credit, because in the early days, what we did was we just would leave crop in the field, like leave strip, and then we would hunt like corn. And of course, then it's there until December, and then you got to go back with your combine and pick it all up, and you're just not done ever harvesting.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so we collaborated. I don't know when we started making these permanent food plots, but collaborated over the years, and just would make common sense stuff where it's not in the middle of the field. Tried to get them on the edge. Tried to make them so that they were next to a draw, so you could actually hunt the draw and get the birds out of the draw and get them into your food plot where you can manage them better. Kind of strategized on where they were and why we would put them there, and once we kind of got that established, then they were more permanent, so to speak. And at one time, I remember, I think we had 800 acres.
Yeah, it was up in the high sevens, if I remember right now.
Which was about 100 strips.
Yeah, we're down to about 380 acres of them now, roughly. So.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and this is just my curiosity more than anything, from a soil health standpoint, managing those areas, is that more of a challenge too, where you tend to plant the same, I would guess, kind of hunting strip mix? And talk to me a little bit about that.
So early on, the strategy was to use a multi-species cover crop, basically, if you will. And there's a number of blends out there that are designed specifically for hunting. They've got sorghums, they've got some millets, they've got different things in there, which lends itself to the diversity. The problem with that is that it's very difficult to control unwanted species, weeds and different things, because you can't just spray a selective herbicide out there. And so one of the things that started to develop was sandbur and puncture vine. Those two weeds were really, really hard to control once they established themselves. And from a hunter's perspective, they're miserable. The dogs get full of them. They get them in their paws. The guys get them on their pant legs, and they're hard to remove. And it just, year after year, they got worse and worse. So we had to switch a little bit, pivot more to a specific crop like milo or sorghum.
Okay.
Or Roundup Ready corn. But the problem is you got to think about what holds birds. And the cane and milo seem to hold birds better. But again, it's a challenge. So now we're going with herbicide-tolerant milos to try and take the grasses out with limited success. We've had a couple of years where it didn't work very well. And this year it looks like it's going to work pretty well.
Okay.
But, yeah, it's definitely a challenge because I can't diversify that very easily.
Right.
I'd love to be able to put a cereal grain in there and do some other things. The other thing we could do is move them.
Right.
But from a field boundary standpoint, that means I have to update boundaries in my system, and everything that goes to the operators, the combines, and all that has to be updated.
Right.
See? So it's challenging.
Yeah. And you've probably, you talk about those permanent locations from a hunter standpoint. You've kind of got paths to everywhere you're going to go, and your guides understand, like, I'm not saying that those guys aren't highly intelligent, but sometimes when you've got them guys rolled out of bed at 7 o'clock in the morning and want to go hunting, to just be able to do the same thing, and exactly where you're going to set guys, it probably makes things a little easier.
Well, and there's a sense too that everyone likes to repeat a memory that they created from the years prior, and they like, I remember hunting this, and they have, that's what they're here to do, is create memories. And so it sometimes does help to be relatively in the same spot.
Right.
But Mother Nature, just thinking back over the years, I mean, we've been through tough years where we didn't get a very good stand and there really isn't much to hunt, to fighting through a jungle. I mean, we've had years where cane was 13 feet tall, and these guys, there were several of them, just went in with a machete and didn't come out, didn't know if they were going to come out of there or not. But it was just, it makes me giggle thinking about kind of all the challenges that we've been through over the years, just in food plots.
Well, and that's just so wild, because you think about pheasant hunting and where that activity takes place. So you still have to have cover for the birds, but then it's still got to be a good experience for the guys that are chasing them around.
Yeah, it was a kind of a tough balance to get the rest of the team, not so much Bryan. Bryan got it, but like the rest of the team, to really convey to them, because they didn't have any part of, they didn't know the guys, they didn't have any part of helping out with F&B with them, and they didn't know anything about it. And so the guys would always make comments like, well, when I go elk hunting, they don't strip out the mountains for me. Why do we got to do this? And I think now I just feel like there's a little better sense of unification there, and people understand.
Well, it's such a big part of what we do here now with the lodge, and it's just ingrained in the culture with those of us that are newer into this operation.
And something else that I didn't realize, and Brian and I talk a lot about this, and we're really grateful for this, I feel. When we built that lodge, something I didn't know happened. Really, it turned into a huge advocacy piece for our family, right? At first, there would just be a handful of people that would kind of want to go on a farm tour and just say, hey, I'm interested in what you guys are doing. Can we take a few minutes to go do it? Yeah, sure. No problem. Well, over time, more and more people, kept asking about that. And then I figured, I just stopped, and I thought, we just need to do this. Just kind of make it mandatory. And so now it is part of the suite. It's part of what you do when you come hunting here. And so that's been a huge piece for us. They go on the farm tour, they see everything that we do, they get back to the bar, and that's all they talk about. That's it.
Yeah, to add to that, the advocacy thing, I think the other thing it's done is it's lend itself super nice for family. And I'm not talking just the immediate family. I'm talking the cousins, the second cousins, and it's such a wonderful place to get together and share memories. And Thanksgiving week, actually, ever since we built it, starting like on Tuesday or Wednesday of that week, we physically move in over there.
Yeah.
And it'll be full. We'll usually have 60, 70, sometimes 80 people for Thanksgiving dinner. And it's really it's a wonderful place. And I remember the first year that we built it, that Thanksgiving, my mom and dad, of course, were still alive. And all of my siblings were there. Almost all of the grandkids were there. And almost all of the great-grandkids were there for my mom and dad. And we had a picture of that. How special is that?
Huge.
That's
I mean, huge.
Literally over 100 people in a photo that are direct descendants of my mom and dad. Just an amazing photo. And that wouldn't happen you couldn't do that in somebody's house,
No.
right? So
the way.
that and it's still today, we still do those things, and I think that's why the lodge is always going to be special for me.
Yeah, me too. That's exactly right. Tell the story about when you approached Grandpa Martin and letting him know that we were gonna pull the trigger on this thing.
So this was about April of 2012. We had a plan. This again happened very quickly. We had an architectural design. We had a budget, and I went to Dad and I said, Dad, we're going to spend X amount on this. And at that time, it was $2.1 million. And go ahead.
Not to derail you, was Martin still a partner at the time?
Yes.
Okay.
He had not yet given his 10% to Nicholas,
Okay.
so he was still a partner.
Okay.
And I said, Dad, and this was in his living room, and I said, Dad, we're proposing to build a $2.1 million pheasant hunting lodge. And he just sat there and he says, yep, I think you can make that work. Totally took me by surprise because I was expecting, you crazy damn kid, that's just ridiculous. You shouldn't do that. But he had enough vision and foresight to know that diversity is important. And he knew that we had the skill set to make it work.
Yeah.
Well, and I harken back to one of the stories that Greg told on the first episode with Martin Sr. going and picking up a tractor by Murdo. And just, that seems like it's so ingrained in Jorgensen genetics that you have the foresight that we have to be diverse and you're willing to step out on the limb.
All right.
And step off the cliff and say, we're going to make it happen.
I'd be curious to see today what he'd say about the golf course proposal.
I would too.
Might get a different reaction there.
Yeah, we'll see.
So you brought it up, and so obviously, from the first episode that we shot with you guys and the whole family here, diversity is something that this operation takes extremely serious. Whether it's diversity within one of these three sectors, the cattle sector with the IBG and all the things we do there, your cropping sector with Summit Gold, the Lodge. Talk to me a little bit about what's coming next under some of these diamonds, and I think that's really impactful because we talk about 5 generations being on this place, and they don't last that long if they're not as diverse as what you guys have been able to become.
No, and that you're 100% right. And I tell my people too, it's, when you look at our logo, there is diversity within each diamond. It's not just Summit Gold. It's also selling seed wheat, and we're trying to value add. We're not just in the cattle business. We're in the seed stock business. And I want to say we're doing it world class.
Absolutely.
Everything. I like the word world class. We're doing our very best to be as world class as possible. Same thing with the agritainment piece. We're looking to add a sporting club or change to a sporting club concept, which means we're going to add golf. Right, we're going to get more people in the beds, as Brian referred to. Even in the preliminary number crunching of the lodge, people in the beds is what made it work. And to do that, we need to give them another reason to come to South Dakota, other than to look at black cattle and other than to shoot pheasants. We need to get them to come and maybe play golf in different different times of the year.
And especially to Ideal South Dakota, because for those of you that don't know where Ideal South Dakota is, you're coming here to get here.
Yeah.
It's not easy to get.
And it's not the easiest.
Otherwise, you're not coming. No.
But we're blessed to have this chunk of property that really is quite scenic, and it lends itself to golf. It's a piece of property that we discovered golf on. Right. We are not manufacturing golf on this piece of property. We discovered it. And if we went on a golf course tour today, I could show you the green on number 8 is already there.
Yep.
Right? The green on number 2 is already there. And it's really unique because it ties in to our logo. It ties into what we're doing with soil health. It ties into what we're doing with the land, and it ties into what our family does.
Yeah, and the current logo of the lodge is a silhouette of the 3 diamonds.
Right.
It doesn't have the same images, but it's the silhouette. So that means that, in my mind, in my perspective, it means that lodge is separate and different, but it's still part of the whole image of the logo.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important, and I hope they keep that. If they change to a sporting club, I hope they somehow incorporate that to keep that in the background, so that the impression is it's still part of our family.
Yep.
And Cody took me on that golf course tour the other day when Dave Mullins was here, and changed my perception of what that thing can mean to this operation. And again, it can add an opportunity to advocate for agriculture, beef cattle production in the United States. I mean, we're talking about the opportunity with the piece of property that this golf course is going to sit on for there to be cattle grazing, and
not far.
It's not going to take away from what we do. It's just a little bit of an addition there in a beautiful draw that really doesn't do us any good, because I'd hate to have to go gather cows out of that thing every day.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Could potentially take the least productive piece of property that we have today and turn it into the most valuable, by far, the most valuable chunk of property that we can own. Because right now, today, we're not utilizing that chunk of property where the footprint of the lodge sits. That 400 and some odd acres is almost completely not used. So yeah, I mean, it completely changes the focus of that property.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brian, why don't you go ahead too and touch on, while we're here, Cody mentioned the diversity under the farming part of the triangle, and we've touched on Summit Gold. Mm-hmm. Let's go ahead and touch on the certified seed as well. That's another thing that I think you guys have done so well. From my perspective, getting to watch is certainly something I take a lot of notes on, that we don't just bring a commodity product to the market.
Right.
When we bring something to the market, when we put this stamp on it,
it's quality.
It right. means there's more value to it than just what your commodity product is. Would you go ahead and touch on that?
Sure.
For me, please?
So we've probably been selling certified seed since the early 2000s, maybe late 90s at the earliest. But it's really a great way for us to value enhance a commodity, because everything that we do, whatever widget we're making or growing, we try and figure out a way of value and adding value to it, so that we're not just controlled by the market value of it. So certified seed is a way of taking a $5 wheat commodity today, or $4.50, and adding about $3 to $4 a bushel to it or more. But it's not easy. So, we grow seed stock from SDSU at what we call the foundation level, small acreages of that, and then from the harvest of that, we grow registered class, and from the harvest of that, we grow the third level, the certified class. So it takes 3 years to start a new variety to get it to a saleable level, whether it's oats, spring wheat, or winter wheat. So it's not a quick return on your investment. But once you get there and you cross all the T's and dot all the I's in the process of that, you have to make investment of bins, you have to make investment of cleaning facilities, seed treating facilities, all those kinds of things come into play. But at the end of the day, we're selling a product that's not just a commercial grade product. It's a very good product.
Mm.
Well, folks, I hope this gives you a much better understanding of why this logo is what it is. And I know it's a cool logo to look at, but there's way more depth to it than just the look. And obviously, moving forward, we're going to dive a lot deeper into all three of the things that we've talked about, because there's so much diversity under each one and so many different parts. If you have any questions, please send them to us on Facebook. Like I said, we're going to touch on a lot of different things moving forward in this, and we'd love to be able to focus on something you guys want to hear about. Cody or Bryan, you guys have any closing comments as we go ahead and
Just
step away?
thanks for the opportunity, as always. And the logo, if I could brand it on me, I would. It was good.
I'm surprised you don't have a tattoo on your back.
Maybe I do.
Well, I sure appreciate you guys' time. We're in a really busy time of year for us here. Harvest is full swing. Lease bulls are running out, and we're all over the place with meetings. And we'll go ahead and say what an exciting time to be in agriculture, and especially in the cattle business. Got to spend the week at Steamboat Springs at Superior Sale, and my goodness, it's an exciting time for all of our commercial producers.
Really
and
is.
so
I can add to that by saying I'm glad I'm not just a grain farmer right now, because I'd be
Right.
in world trouble. I love being able to grow feed. That gives me a lot more opportunity. So, yeah.
we appreciate you guys tuning in, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.